really great to be here. Thank you, and thank you to the festival for inviting our film. I live in New York. I make movies about New York, but I have a long history with this city. I lived here in 1985 with my friend Patrick Santana on 20th Street between Guerrero and Valencia. That was 31 years ago. And I've been supported by the San Francisco Film Society and the Kenneth Raymond Foundation with my work for the last 5 or 6 years in various forms of fashion. This is a very welcoming city. It is a very nurturing city to the arts, and to see this festival still in full bloom 49 years or 59 years after it started is inspiring, because you're always wondering where is the audience and who are the people who still love watching movies on the big screen, and so it's great to see you all here. I will say, obviously San Francisco has changed a lot in 31 years since I lived here, and so have I in that time, and really this film is about change. Whatever form it takes, however it becomes personal to you, to your neighbors, to your friends, to your children, to your parents, and to yourself. These are the questions that I hope the film raises. I will be here afterwards with one of our wonderful actors, Theo Taplitz, to answer questions, and thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the film. I get the great pleasure of introducing Theo Taplitz.
So we'll get some questions from the audience, but I wanted to start off with one myself. I mean, since we have both of you here, I wanted to ask you, it's one thing to write a character, any character. It's another thing to then when you have your actor and you're working together to bring him to life. And I was just wondering about, if you can talk about how you guys developed Jake together.
Yeah, I think that's very true. You don't really cast actors, you cast people, and then they become the characters you've imagined in some other form. Theo, I initially met because he auditioned for the film. Theo lives in Los Angeles, and he put himself on tape. He read the script and put one scene on tape, and when I saw it, it was actually literally like I was watching a documentary about the character of Jake. Like, it was so authentic and so real from the very first moment. But I almost feel like I told him nothing, if you want to know the truth. I cast him very quickly. I think always when I cast a film, I try to start being attentive to who that person is and thinking of ways that it might change a little bit. And certainly with this film, I would say the precision was around the age of the character, which was written 12, 14, but Theo was definitely 12. He's now 13, so he's grown up. And that had some effect on the script, kind of where he was in his own development.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also want to say that Ira was, very big, acting-wise. It's not like you didn't teach me anything, because you taught me some very useful stuff that I will take on for the rest of my career. He stressed me to not push anything, to trust the emotions. Less is more, he said, which I think I'll continue to do throughout my acting career.
I want you to know Theo has come down. He lives in LA, but he's actually been in Seattle for a film festival where he has 2 films that he's made in the festival up there. He came down today for the screening. But he's going to go back and watch his film.
All right, how about we throw it out to the audience? Anyone have a question? Do you want to raise your hand? We will call on you. All right, okay, right up here.
I'm curious about that acting exercise when they were repeating stuff. I had seen that exercise before. Is that a real technique that's
People in the theater hear a question?
Yeah.
He was asking about the acting exercise that we see on the screen. Where that came from, is that something that is employed? Is that something you employed yourself?
You know, that's another example. I felt Michael Barbieri came in for an open call in New York. He found the announcement for the call at the Lee Strasberg Institute where he was studying since he was like 9 or something. He was 13, so a few years he'd been there. And when I cast him in the script, the character did capoeira, which was a form of martial arts. That kid was not going to do capoeira. It's just not. But I transformed the character so that he would be much like Michael, someone who'd been studying acting. That is his acting teacher at the Lee Strasberg Institute, who we met when we were sort of on a location scout, and he was so charismatic. So what's kind of interesting about that scene is Strasberg's method, if anyone knows about it. It's a very particular kind of method that is Stanislavski based. This exercise is actually Meisner, which was his competitor. So they're doing Meisner in method school, but they were able to do it, and I think because they had a long history of working together, that is one of the scenes, and there's a few throughout the scenes throughout the film where I let things loose, because I'm really, in a way, if you have a few scenes that have almost a documentary feel, they inform the rest of the film, which is primarily very scripted. And so that was one of those scenes. Those were all kids who were in acting class. I will tell you that Michael Barbieri 2 weeks ago got into LaGuardia School.
I think there was another question on the side there. Oh, on this side.
I really like the ending. I was wondering in the filmmaking process if there was ever any pressure internally or externally to write a more conventionally happy Hollywood ending.
Good question. So the question was about the ending and if, which she liked, but that, was there ever pressure internally or externally to write a more Hollywood ending? There was no pressure externally because this is a truly independent film, financed by about 20 wonderful people who came together to make it possible, which means not any one of them is kind of the boss of the story, and really we were allowed to make the film we wanted to make. So the pressures were all internal. This film was very influenced by a couple of other movies. One is the director Ozu, the Japanese film director, who made 2 films. One was called I Was Born But, and the other was called Good Morning, which were both films about children who go on strike against their parents. So that was very influential. There was another movie, maybe some of you have seen it, called The World of Henry Orient, with Peter Sellers, about 2 girls in New York and their kind of cross-class friendship. They get obsessed with Peter Sellers. And it's a really realistic film until the last moments when it's a totally wonderful Hollywood ending and the kids come back together, their friendship has been broken. And I wanted to try to do that. And so I wrote a script that had an ending more like that. And when we actually shot it, we also shot this ending. And it felt really inauthentic to the story that we were telling, the characters, the kind of film we were making, and most importantly, it resolved a lot of issues which cannot be resolved. It just felt like impossible. So this ending really relied a lot on Theo, and maybe you have something to say about sort of the emotions that go into that last moment.
Yeah, well, by that time, I believe that, Jake has been, conflicted on who he is, what he's going to be, whether he's going to be an artist, his discussions externally, he's a very internal kid. And I feel a lot more sure of himself, become a lot more, sure of what he's going to do, of who he is. And I believe that when he sees Michael, I think there's a lot of things going through his head, like, the great times we had together, but also, what would it be like if, we got back together? Would it be this sort of awkward, sort of, hi, we haven't seen you, which I believe my character doesn't want. I think he wants to leave his friendship where it was, which was in a happy place, and I feel that he's comfortable leaving it there, and, I think that was the choice that Jake made, and I think it was valuable.
I have a question. Sometimes, because I'm here in a room with people who watch this film, I'm curious how many people in this room remember a certain friendship that they had from a childhood or adolescent period that they lost, similar to the one in the film. You can raise your hand if that's something that resonates. That's what it seems to me. For me, that was very personal as well, and I think it really became the heart of the film. So it was interesting that at some point I tried to subvert that in a different way.
Right there in the middle.
Why did you choose the seagull?
Why the seagull? It's a good question, and it was something different before that. I think it was Arthur Miller, View from the Bridge. We chose. Oh no, it was No Exit. Now I remember. There was a long battle to get the rights to No Exit, which ended with the longtime lover of Sartre, who still controls the estate, who's in her late 80s, and she denied her request. So we had to change it. I had been working with Mauricio Zacharias, my co-writer. We've been working for about a year and a half on a script about Montgomery Clift, the actor, and there was a very key moment in Montgomery Clift's life when he performed The Seagull in New York. So we knew The Seagull very well. And I think Chekhov in general is an inspiration for me as a storyteller in terms of his ability to find the big in the everyday and the tragedy and the lightness within domestic situations, within the homes and within the family. It was also kind of funny when he was doing The Seagull.
What was the size of your budget for this movie?
What was the size of the budget? I'm not going to answer that question. I mean, I will say that everything in the world to me is somehow about money. And certainly all my films are either about money, well, usually they're about two things, love and money, which are the two things in which, in a way, character is often seen and drama is found. So it's an interesting question, but I don't feel like answering it.
That does bring up one thing. I mean, the film is so much about the voice of friendship, but also you have that background story of sort of the gentrification and all the myriad of angles that issue brings up with people, which is certainly something that speaks well to San Francisco. I think a lot of your films, you have the ability to combine sort of the very personal story, but set in a background that brings in larger issues that operate outside of what the kids' world is. Can you talk about when do you know? How do you figure out what elements you're going to bring in, what other things you're going to layer on top of the heart of the story?
I have a really wonderful collaborative process with my co-writer Mauricio. This is our third feature that we've made together, and we have a process which is really about talking about watching movies, which are often narrative inspirations, and talking about things that are happening in our lives. So for example, when we started working on this film and we decided we were going to remake these Ozu films, and so we had a basic plot, every time I came in, and Mauricio talks about this also, he is from Rio and his family owned a small store down there, and there was a woman that they were trying to get out, who they were trying to evict. So every week that we would get together, I would hear bits and pieces of that story, and I would always be really aware, as was he, that there was another side. They were trying to get her out, but what was her story? So in a way, I think you look for the places in which your narrative interacts with things that are happening around you, and how those things seem resonant. And I guess I do want my work to be timely, but I find that it's timely mostly if it seems compelling to me in a very personal way. I believe that it will somehow relate to others.
Questions? Is there one back row there?
Yes, I wanted to say thank you for a very nuanced way of dealing with the class issue. I don't feel like it was very black and white, that there was not, like a good guy and bad. I mean, there were clearly many viewpoints to look at the issue, but as my husband said, well, the sister was really the bad guy. It did take a little bit of the pressure off, but I do think that it was very provocative and very, very relevant, and I appreciate the way that you presented that.
Thank you for that. I think it was clear to me that it needed to be imbalanced who was in the right in this film. And one of the things that we did is neither the family of Jake and Brian and Kathy, they're not super rich. They're middle class or just above middle class in some ways because they own property. But Leonore's character is not just in this dire states of poverty. They're somewhere in the middle, both of them, and it fluctuates, I think, for many people in terms of who you side with, and I think that's what makes them interesting. There's a great quote which someone told me after watching this movie, and I'm going to just keep quoting it because it's Jean Renoir, so many of you probably know it, but it's something that I feel like is a guide for me as a filmmaker now, which is a quote from Rules of the Game, which is that everyone has their reasons. And I think as a director, you try to understand everyone's reasons as deeply as you can.
Time for a couple more questions? Right there, Seth.
When you said the kid that played your friend.
Do you in touch with Michael?
Oh yeah. I would say so. We've Skyped at a number of instances. I mean, he's a really fun guy, very interesting. He's completely his character. He really is. I mean, he's charismatic, he's outgoing, and he's just all around a nice guy.
He's a very sweet. I think for me it was very clear that I needed to find two kids that would hold your interest, and I think I did a good job.
We would all agree with that. So thank you very much for being here with us.
The film opens in August, so if you like it, please tell your friends about it. It's so great to be here. Thank you all.